Well, good evening, and thank you for sticking with the day. I hope this last session won't be anticlimactic. We've had a lot of great discussions today, and I know with the panel that we have here, there's going to be a very interesting conversation that will break out. I also want to invite members of the audience to consider this pretty participatory because we're reflecting on the things that we've heard about and thought about during the day. It says here that I should begin by thanking our session sponsor, Lipsy's, plus all of the summit sponsors who are listed in the program and in the slideshows between sessions. The summit would not be possible without their support. So please note who has supported this important event and patronize them and thank them. Self-intro is the next item. So my name is Cordell Heyman. Those of you who have attended this event religiously in the past have seen me up here a lot over the years. I think we've been doing this, 15 or 20 times. So my introduction is that I'm from Baton Rouge. I practiced law here for many years. I also built and ran a company called Petroleum Service Corporation for a long time. And I found myself as the chair of a process back in the late 90s to really be the first shot at intentional planning in Baton Rouge, at least in many, many years. And that was called Plan Baton Rouge, which I was the chair of that process. And that was the process that resulted in the revitalization of downtown Baton Rouge, including facilities like the one we're sitting in today. And following that, I continued to work with Boo Thomas, who was the executive director, as we called her then. And after the hurricanes of 2006, our committee transformed into a nonprofit called Center for Planning Excellence. So I was the founding chair and continued as the chair of that board until a couple of years ago, and I'm still proud to be a member of that board. So on the far end, we have Trey Godfrey, the Senior Vice President of Policy at the Baton Rouge Area Chamber. Trey drives regional and state-level initiatives to create a more competitive region for business growth and talent development, particularly through the organization's public policy and government affairs activity. Additionally, Trey leads a strategic coalition building for regional initiatives, including those related to education, workforce, transportation, quality of place, entrepreneurship, and small businesses, criminal justice, and others. I think he's a pretty busy guy. Melissa Lee is the Director of Planning and Community Engagement at Concordia, which is a planning firm in New Orleans. An experienced urban redevelopment professional and solutions-focused administrator, Melissa has over 20 years of experience shepherding socially innovative programs across the country from inception to completion. She's committed to making planning more responsive to quality of life demands of all populations, developing new tools for understanding how social and economic conditions affect access across racial and socioeconomic disparities, and diversifying the involvement of those participating in planning processes. Welcome, Melissa. The third panelist needs no introduction. Boo Thomas was the founder and president, and now president emerita of the Center for Planning Excellence. Much of the great work that you've witnessed and heard about today can be directly attributed to Boo's incredible leadership over so many years. She is well-versed in community-driven land use planning and implementation and has led successful revitalization efforts across this region. She's been an advocate for smart growth in Louisiana throughout her career Under her leadership, CPEX worked in more than 25 parishes and cities across the state. Welcome back, Boo. Boo and I were reflecting how it was different this year, that we're not constantly up here. So fortunately, we've been succeeded by some great leaders, as you've seen today. So before we get into reflections on today, I want to take a moment to reflect a bit on the sort of preliminaries this morning, for which I hope most of you were here. First of all, I thought Camille's speech, in which she talked about the, very transformative efforts, and she made an emphasis of that and kind of underscored what does that really mean. And if you know Camille, you know that she will stop at nothing to make the transformational changes that she and we know are needed. It was so great to have Governor Edwards here this morning. Every time we've had a summit, we've had a political leader as one of the lead-off speakers. And I would have to say that in general, they're complimentary of CPEX and those who are there, and then but there's not a lot of meat on that bone, and pretty soon they're on their way. I thought what you saw this morning is a governor who has seen the incredible importance of the issues that CPEX has frankly brought to him and helped him understand, him and his staff. And you could see the level of commitment that he has and the depth of understanding that he has. This is a rare and wonderful thing in our state, and it shows the great value of really political leadership. And so I just want to reflect that we're very fortunate to have had him as our governor, and to these initiatives that he started are unprecedented in our state and actually in all the other southern states. So he's really been leading the way, and I hope others will follow his example. So with that, I will retire to my chair and we will get down to business. I'd like to just begin by checking in with my co-panelists up here and kind of see how the day has gone from your perspective and how you're feeling about the day. So could we just start with Melissa and go down the row?
Sure. Thank you very much, and good afternoon, everybody. To answer your question, I'd like to start with providing kind of my personal standpoint. Personally, I am leaving today full because we were able to gather, full because I was able to ideate with my colleagues. Some of my most esteemed and favorite colleagues are here today, and the ability to kind of meet new people as well. The day has flown by because there has been such deep, rich context provided throughout every session and throughout every conversation. And I've started to identify kind of a common thread that carried me through the day. And quickly, it centers around the idea of developing foresight, identifying solutions, and never stopping to think about new and innovative strategies. So I think maybe it's the word would be create, right? So the idea of developing foresight to really understand existing and emerging challenges, right? How are these challenges affecting our livelihood and our well-being because of climate change? Identifying solutions, but in a way that makes sure, right, that the research and findings and outcomes benefits all of us. And the creation of these strategies that are community-based and responses that are really deeply, deeply centered in community. So that's from a personal standpoint, that's where I'm coming from.
Your turn? That's my turn. Okay. I'm not sure I want to go. Okay. It's interesting sitting here next to Trey Godfrey. I remember his father walking downtown being such a leader, Brace Godfrey, and what we were doing downtown. And then after Katrina, he spoke to the Louisiana Recovery Authority and made a speech that has stayed with me since 2006 about exposing the underbelly of Louisiana. I mean, it was the first time I ever heard that term. Some of you have heard that before. What my takeaway for today, I'm trying to distract myself so I don't get emotional, oh God, was congratulations to Camille and her staff. Damn it, I did it. So, look. Looking out at this audience is the most diverse audience we've ever had. Congratulations. And so then I've learned so much today, so many new lessons, except they're all old, but we're seeing them in a new way, and that we have fresh energy and fresh people taking these on. The younger generation is here. One of the things that we learned years ago is that the zip code still determines your health, and that's true, but now we have new tools to deal with that. Thank you, Mitch, and thank you, CPEX, for those tools. But just seeing the discussion with in the panel on healthy living, and then the whole thing about managed retreat, but through this whole day, like everything Melissa said, I'd just like to say yes, yes, and yes. But everything that was weaved through this today was that there is hope for the future, that we can deal with climate change. We're being forced to deal with that. And it was just like, was it just 6 or 8 years ago, we couldn't even put climate change in the title of our summit brochure, because we didn't want to offend our sponsors. And look at this today, how differently we are addressing, we're bold, we're taking risk, we're doing great things. And so I think looking at what we've learned today, what we've been exposed to, but how we've been enriched has been just pretty tremendous. So thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for your kind words. I have watched for my entire professional career the work that you've done in admiration. So kudos to you. This is the fruit of your labor, so you deserved to get emotional in your commentary. So the question is, how do we feel? I feel actually a little bit overwhelmed. I have the unenviable task of sitting with these three other remarkable people on this stage. A guest preacher came in a few weeks ago, and he got in the pulpit and he said something to the effect like, I feel like the farmer who entered his mule into the Kentucky Derby. And everybody said, well, why would you enter a mule into the Kentucky Derby? You'll never win. And he said, the farmer just looked back at them and smiled and said, oh, I'm not here to win. I'm just glad to have the connection. So I'm just glad to have this connection and to sit and to share time and space with all of the fabulous people who have shared with us today, as my watch beeps and tells me that I've had a high heart rate because I'm nervous sitting still. As I just kind of think back, I shared time today between my company end of year retreat and these sessions, and so there's been a lot to take in today. One of the things, though, that really stands out is how many times we've heard terms that start with the prefix inter. The interrelated or integrated or intersection or the interaction between a lot of different seemingly disparate parts of what we all do, and the interplay of them in creating resilient communities, right? Communities that can succeed and thrive moving into our future. And so at all times, I'm asking myself, what then is the intersection between all of these factors from climate and equity and resilience and public health to my work? What's the interaction of that with economic development, right? And how can we institutionalize the solutions? And one of the things you mentioned, solutions, Melissa, oftentimes we come to events like this, right, and we talk about what we should do, right? I heard somebody say, so often we try to should on people. I make sure I say that clearly enough that y'all don't think I said something else. But the thing that really makes me hopeful is that there wasn't a lot of we should do this. Here's what our plans have been, here's what we've done, and then here's what's going to be institutionalized. One thing that you hear people talk about a lot is from the standpoint of planning, and then plans gathering dust on a shelf somewhere. And so I think that it's always so important to institutionalize and to code the very intelligent plans that we create around creating more resilient communities. A lot more, but I'll leave it there.
So I want to give the audience permission not to applaud every time one of us says something. And we won't take it as a sign of disagreement. But you know, to kind of follow up on Trey's last comment, one of my favorite quotes ever from my guru, Andres Dewani, who did our downtown plan 25 years ago almost, is that in planning, everything connects to everything else. And I was struck by that during Mitch Silver's presentation this morning, where in his role as the leader of parks in New York City, the things that he was doing from that role with parks was addressing so many apparently different social problems and issues. The issues involving youth, issues involving public health, issues involving diversity and inclusion, almost anything you could think about as one of the things we worry about as social issues, he was finding leverage through his role as a park leader to make important impacts on those. The lesson in that for me is that you have to lead from where you are, and whether you're a leader in, and I'm now talking about people in positions of leadership, that whether you're a leader in transportation or in land use planning or in public health or really or education, almost anything like that, you really have an opportunity to impact a lot of issues that go beyond the sort of formal mandate of the issue that you're ostensibly leading on. So that's, to go back to Andres Dewani's comment, that's how in planning everything connects to everything else. And I like to keep that in mind. Melissa, what stands out for you today?
I think I'd want to pick up with what you said just in terms of our keynote with Mitch Silver. I think that the biggest takeaway for me was that the complex challenges that we're facing really require systemic solutions. And these are grounded, right, in transformational stakeholder engagement, transformational economic mindset, transformational thinking in terms of how we are financing, right, these solutions, and how are we framing these solutions in the context of climate adaptation. I think it's really important to think big in that way. The more that we are able to expand the breadth of data that we are able to research and its impacts on our physical space and in our planning and in our development, I think really leads us to these big levers and these big changes. And the idea just around how do we consider and center equity in all of this is clearly one of our biggest challenges, but I think that it feels great to know that we are all of one accord in that.
Again, is this on? Yeah. There were so many things throughout the day, but to build on what Melissa just said, a concept that was that Mitch threw out today was about equity, and that's just a word we don't need to use. Instead, it's about fairness, and when you look at that as a concept and what we're trying to achieve, that is so important. Diversity, equity, inclusion, DEI, you know, we hear that all the time. But what a wonderful way and a different and encouraging way to look at that. I loved also when, and you know, in this culture that we are all living in the US right now with so much anger and distrust, about looking at things, as he said, if you say no to something, you're really saying yes to something else. And what is that? And what a wonderful way to engage people and to get them to talk with us and to think with us and to listen to them so that we can then move forward.
So I don't know about you all, but I feel a whole lot smarter having sat and listened to that last panel. And if there's one thing that I took, particularly from Mitchell Silver's comments, is the notion that the built environment is public health infrastructure. Never would have thought about it that way, except how he, in a very erudite manner, hammered that to us, how much the built environment and public health merge into one another to the degree that it bears being very, very deliberate. And so I work in the world of economic development, right? And typically in that space, you're dealing with things that drive dollars. The thing in Beth Osborne had a quote. I wasn't here, but I read it on our business publication, the Daily Report, Afternoon Report, quoted her. Business leaders are really quick to push money at solutions because they benefit from them. But when better solutions don't exist, like transit, for instance, that they won't really put money into, you're going to pay for it sooner or later in one way or another. Being very deliberate about how we create our built environments. There's going to be a public health cost of that for those that are not done very thoughtfully and very deliberately. In other words, you're going to pay for that sooner or later, whether you think you are or not. Another one of those things, not germane to this conversation, but just for the sake of example, is childcare. Businesses and industry are going to pay in lost wages, lost productivity, lost days at work because their employees don't have this very, very critical infrastructure. So we can be very smart about how we invest in the environments that we create, particularly the built environment, knowing the public health ramification. All things are tied together. I don't remember the quote you said from Andres Dewani, but I'm going to write it down next time. But the interplay of all those things, nothing happens in a vacuum, right? Everything impacts something else. And in that way, particularly from the space that I occupy, it hit me really, really hard, Mr. Silver, as you made those comments, because everything has a consequence. And we rarely consider those when we begin to make decisions on investments. And so thank you so much for bringing so much light to that.
I'd like to comment on one of the two breakout sessions this afternoon. And of course, when we create the summit agenda, there's so many things we'd like to talk about that we end up having to divide the audience a bit. But I was able to attend the session from regarding our smaller communities. And we had Mayor DeCourt from New Iberia, Mayor Foucault from Franklin, and Aaron Bass from the Tesh Project. For those of you that were not among those that saw that, first of all, it was a demonstration of the importance of energetic public leadership. And what you could see in those mayors, in their energy and determination to improve their communities, was just really awesome. And the specific things that they have jumped and done is a great object lesson, I think, that many of us could follow. One of the things I really liked about it was that all three of these presenters were basically presenting about a coordinated, increasingly coordinated and cooperative effort between the communities that are along the Bayou Teche, which, as you know, is one of our most historic regions in our state. I don't know about you all, but in years past, when I've had visitors ask me, where should I go to experience? I know that Cajun culture is, something really interesting, but unless I'm personally going with them as their guide, where can I send them? And, it's to send them to Lafayette or to send them to Breaux Bridge and so forth. There's a couple of things to do, but for these communities along the Teche to begin really reinforcing their historical French heritage and the natural systems that they live around is creating a destination that, for me, I'm able now to say, you know what, I think here's what you can do. Go to Breaux Bridge, go on to Lafayette, and then go on down the Bayou Teche to these communities and see what's going on there. So kudos to those leaders and to those communities for the things that they're accomplishing.
Just looking at my notes here, from this afternoon session, supporting our places and people as climate impacts and drives population movements, and this was the panel that Camille was on, again, thinking about this transformative mindset, this transformative economic mindset, specifically, how are we measuring success through a more comprehensive lens, particularly when we are looking at our economic systems in which we are able to move the lever. How do we create a balance, right, between returns, both financial and human? And then thinking about, how do we pay for resilience adaptation programs? And what do these projects look like with this type of mindset? And really thinking about considerations of equity in financing, equity in resilience, and equity in adaptation. These layers are complex, they are real, and we are confronted with these challenges every day. So what are the tools that we need to adjust in relevant ways in order to kind of create a new way, new policies, new programming, and how do we address these gaps now? And I think that really looking at these organizational silos that we are challenged with the mission and the goal, not being adequately met is huge. So how are we leveraging these resources needed to create transformational change at scale? So that was something that's really resonating with me right now.
I wonder how many of you in this room have ever dreamed about the Stafford Act? Raise your hands. A couple, yeah, Because it has haunted me and many of us in this room since Katrina. Katrina and Rita, because every time we would be talking about a solution to a problem or the resources that we needed, oh, you can't do that because of the Stafford Act, right? You cannot. And did you know that Ashley Shelton of Power Coalition told us in that same seminar that the Stafford Act has been changed to allow people to fix up their properties and receive resources without clear titles. They can maybe bring their electricity bills for the last year. What? Think how transformational that would have been in 2005, 2008, you name it. The other thing that I wanted to mention, if you were in Don Bain's in the session this morning about making strides, and we were talking about the first people that can move when the area begins to flood or that had never flooded before are the people with means. And who's left? And then the next group that can't move are the ones that don't have quite as many means. But then who's left behind? The elderly, the poor. And so look at what we're doing in Louisiana. Look what we're doing in Louisiana. And he also said, you know, we have the most number of counties, parishes, that will have over 50% of the parishes that will be flooded by 2050. Flooded, 50% will be flooded. 50% of the area will be flooded. Isn't that what he said? Okay. But the other thing that he said that I've never thought about is that climate change is a crime. Think about that. Don't think about that?
He had a slide that said the physics are non-negotiable. I'd had to sit there and kind of chew on that for just a minute. Like, regardless of what your opinion is, regardless of what side of the political aisle you sit on, if you sit on one at all, none of that matters. The physics are non-negotiable. And I'm sitting there and I'm looking at those charts that he had from the spreadsheets he created, and like, what do you do? What do you say? And he said, climate change is not fair, right? And it's our reality, and it's one of those things that was a great wake up for me, right? Because it's so easy to get so deep into what we do that we lose the sense that we have to bring such a sense of urgency to solutions around this, how we choose or don't. I mean, really, whatever you do, you're making a choice, right? So how you choose or not to bring urgency to this and to how we move our state and our regions forward. You said earlier, Melissa, I love the term so much I wrote it down. You said transformational stakeholder engagement. Jamila, I'm sorry, I don't remember your last name, from the LSU Ag Center, presented on the last panel, and the work that they're doing in those 6 rural parishes. And that's the thing that really stuck out to me, was that transformative stakeholder engagement. And none of you really need to hear this because you all are in the room for a reason, but I have to say this kind of in my circles very often, is sometimes, and for some of us perhaps often, we need to shut up and listen, right? Poor people don't lack brains, they lack resources, right? People and I said this on another panel, and a young lady from the Power Coalition came up and said, well, that's our motto. But the thing I said is the people who are closest to an issue are also closest to its solution. And so in the world that I inhabit, often folks try to impose solutions upon people, particularly in rural communities. Well, what you need to do is, and I see a 5 minutes left sign, so I'm going to bridge my comments and get off this soapbox pretty quickly. But involving folks who are most affected by something into the process of creating solution to answer the issue that they're dealing with is always in great taste. Now, the notion that in some kind of way can be transformational, I really like. And so that's something, looking through my notes, that sticks out. And as I'm sitting next to the brilliant Boo Thomas, I did like a high school kid when I was 16. I leaned over and looked at her notes. And I saw the word zip codes circled like a whole bunch of times, and she mentioned it earlier. And so I had this thought. I was driving the other day, and I was on South Flannery Road, and if you turn left on Goodwood or you turned right on Goodwood, from South Flannery, like, there's a massive difference in quality of life, probably in what is the term? How long someone lives, life expectancy, driving 1 mile one direction versus 1 mile the other direction. Now, you're from New Orleans, and so your whole city is like that. But how much have we baked those social determinants into how we've built our places? The better question, though, is what are we going to do about that? And how can we begin to deliberately create the communities that we need, where if I turn that way, I don't have a better chance of dying in some ill way earlier than if I just happened to turn that way and lived in that house on that block?
2 minutes, it says. Well, I guess I can't let any discussion of planning go without some comment on transportation. We heard a lot from Beth Osborne today, who has graced us with her insights now for several years at this summit. She keeps preaching the same message. She's very clear. It's frustrating to me that the people that need to hear and understand that message are not in the room. And
Preach.
she said, if you keep doing the same thing, you're likely to get the same result. And we're stuck in that in Louisiana. It's very frustrating to those of us who have worried about that problem for a long time. So let's just keep insisting that things have to change there. So let me conclude. I think someone's coming up, and I want to thank, I'm sorry? Oh. Melissa.
I just had one more comment, just in terms of the very last workshop that I went to was building on what you have, planning around existing resources, and I just feel it's important and compelling enough to say that it was such a sweet reminder. It reminded me that we understand and we know the way of cultivating a stronger sense of togetherness, and how do we create this collective network of support. And it really all centers around creating strategies for our community-based responses that first and foremost uplift and highlight culture. So these cultural strategies, who is setting culture? Who is defining culture? How does culture lead us to our indecisions? It's about strengthening. It gets us to strengthen how we are cohesive as a community and how we are able to celebrate our indigenous traditions and in any other cultural assets define who we are. And then second follows kind of physical strategies. But those physical strategies, in my opinion, really create the opportunity for us to live responsibly, sustainably, and in a community filled with opportunity. And that's in balance with our environment. It's really key and really important, and all of that deserves agency and respect. And then lastly, this economic strategy, right? There's this growing need for innovation and transformational economic impact. So really, how are we thinking about leveraging all of these ways that gets us there? So that was the sweet reminder that I'm leaving with and just wanted to quickly share.
Thank you all. And Camille, are you coming up?
Thank you all so much. So now we have a treat for you. And after this treat, I really hope you stay for the reception and especially the Pechacucha. If you've never been to a Pechacucha before, it is so much fun. It's 10 people pitching their most creative, interesting, or whatever ideas in 400 seconds. And we've had some really wonderful panelists in the past, and so you're going to have a big treat. I'd love to introduce Louis Michaud, and as he's setting up, I'm going to tell you a little bit about how we came across this Grammy Award-nominated Cajun punk musician. Yeah, winner. That's right, thank you. While researching potential speakers for last year's virtual summit, we came across him and about the relief efforts he and his brother were doing across South Louisiana. And they were going into communities and helping people put and getting solar panels on their homes. And I'm gonna ask him to tell you a little bit more about it. But we were just so enamored and impressed, and they got so far, and it's exactly, it epitomizes the culture and resilience and neighborly feel that we have in Louisiana, and we help everyone, and we figure out where the need is, and then we go take care of it. And so it's with this spirit that we also can feel in his music, and we're so grateful to have you here. Thank you so much.
Thank y'all for having me here. I know we got to do it online last year, but yeah, like she said, we came out of necessity. Like she said, it comes out of need, and we came together last year after Hurricane Ida and raised money through a few different methods, through our bands and then through a nonprofit, and we got solar generators to 7 families down the bayou, and solar panels and solar generators. So just out of the necessity right there, it shows how when you really do need to take that next step, people can come together. And it was amazing to see how many people poured support, so we tried our best to take advantage of that moment and through our voice and music. So thank y'all so much for having me at the CPEX. I'm gonna play a song that I wrote back in 2010 during the oil spill, and it's called The Bastille. Sous le 14 de juillet, citoyens, la France levait pour prendre leur égalité. La faute de l'homme cassé l'appui, tête des chefs sur le plat des ouïes. Citoyens, le vie ruinée, à la Bastille aux armes ont crié. Sous le 14 de juillet, citoyens Louisiane criaient, dans le golfe où l'huile coulait. La faute de l'homme cassé l'appui, tête des chefs sur le plat des huiles. Citoyens, le vie ruinée, à la Bastille aux armes ont crié. Allons, Bien, merci. Thank y'all so much for having me. Appreciate y'all.
Woo! Thank you so much. And now we're going to the reception. So everybody go upstairs. We have a live painting and painter, and then we'll have some beverages, nice hors d'oeuvres.